Coming up on the Amazing Art Show, clay mice. We are going to need clay for this project, and you can use a self-hardening clay. If you don't have a self-hardening clay, you could use like Crayola Model Magic would also work. Play-Doh would work. Of course, it's not going to dry as hard as we're wanting, but it's also an option. If you can't get your hands on some self-hardening clay, that's definitely some other options that you can use. Once you have your clay, you are going to need to make some slip, and we will talk about slip in a few minutes. As long as you've got some clay, you can make some slip, no problem. I want you to gather as many kinds of tools as you can think of that you can use for your clay. If you've got clay tools, that would be great. If you don't, that's fine too. Combs work great. Toothpicks and straws and things like that work fine as well. You'll also need a sponge. Anything that you can find that has some kind of a texture to it will also be very helpful today. So gather up those things around the house. If Mom and Dad will let you, you can also use silverware. If you've got plasticware, that works even better because then you can just toss it when you get done or wash it off. This is a cutting wire that is typically used in clay. If you can't get your hands on one of these, another thing that you could use would just be some really kind of thin string, if Mom has some string, and just put it around your clay and you're just going to pull it through. We are going to be making some mice today, and as we are making our mice, I want you to think about fluidity of movement, action, because I don't want our mice to be really stiff little mice. I want them to be mice that can show movement and action and have some fluidity to them. I'm going to be referencing shapes like spheres and cones, and so let's talk about those really quick. A sphere is basically a circle, but a sphere, when you say sphere, instead of it being a flat circle, like a flat surface, a sphere is a three-dimensional shape. So a ball of clay would be a sphere. And so we will need several of those today. One being the head for sure. So remember that whenever you're making a sphere, just put the clay between your hands. You can kind of hit it a little bit if you've got some lumpy bumpies, and you're just going to work it between your hands. Also, while I'm thinking about it, I've got a piece of cloth down here that works really, really nice. Not only does it also provide some extra texture, but it also works really good because you don't want your clay sticking to the surface or the table that you're working on. So this is a good little separation. If you can't find some cloth to use, if you've got a little bit of sand that you could sprinkle down, that also works good so that your clay doesn't adhere to the surface that you're working on. So, sphere. And then the next one that we're going to be talking about is going to be a cone. And cone is kind of like a triangle, but it's a three-dimensional triangle, which means that you can view it from all sides, all three sides. And a cone basically is going to kind of come into that cone shape. It's going to kind of have a shape like this. So little triangular, has a flat bottom. You can also use your table surface to kind of help you get that shape on the bottom. So this, I'm going to work on that a little bit. My cone's a little lumpy bumpy. All right, so that's a pretty good cone shape there. And the last one we're going to talk about will be cylinders. And remember, a cylinder is going to be a round shape as well, but it is a long kind of round shape that is flat on both ends. So I'm using my surface of my table to kind of help with those two shapes, and I'm also going to roll it out with my hand. So all of these shapes are going to be very helpful today. So sphere, cone, cylinder. So whenever I reference those, this is what I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to kind of leave those there for you guys to take a look at. So we are going to be starting with that cone shape. So you will need, I'd say, kind of a good fistful of clay. And some of your fists may be smaller or bigger than mine, depending. But you want, a fair amount of clay. We're going to actually be starting on the body, and we want to start with that cone shape. First thing that I kind of like to do with my clay is I like to just kind of get to work in it a little bit. Soften it up a little bit. And then I'm going to start working on the shape. So I want that narrow top and kind of a fuller bottom. And I'm going to use the table to kind of help me pull that shape out. All right. And the one thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my cloth a little bit and I'm going to actually rub my clay a little bit just because it gives it an interesting texture and kind of add those interesting textures to the clay. Now at this time we are going to go ahead and we're going to need a small sphere. So we need the small ball, and I think I need a little more clay. There we go. And we are actually going to be making the head that we will be adhering to the top of our cone. And remember that our mouse that we're making today is not looking directly at you. Now mine isn't going to be looking directly at you. If you would like to do yours where it is looking directly straight out, that's fine. My mouse is a very cute little mouse, and it's going to be looking straight up. So you're going to see lots of nose and lots of mouth and kind of a different angle on your mouse. So you are more than welcome to use that idea, and if you'd like to do yours in a different way, please feel free, because that's what the Amazing Art Show is about, is you get to put your own spin on it. All right, so we have now got our cone and our sphere, and we are going to attach the two. Now I talked to you a little bit earlier in the show about slip, and slip is what we use. It's kind of like the glue in clay when you adhere two pieces together. If I were to take this and just plop this on here, as the clay started to dry, air would also be getting in between here, and eventually this would be dry and this would be dry, but they would not be dry and still together. They would be dry separately. So this would fall off, my ears would fall off, my nose would fall off. It'd be looking like a Picasso, mouse. It's not what we're going for today. So we're looking for a way to adhere the two together. So I'm going to talk to you really quick. Slip is basically dried clay. It's put into some kind of a container, and then you add more water to it, and then you get, and I'll hold it up for you to see, this slushy kind of substance that is basically just really wet, mushy clay, which is what we use to adhere two pieces together. So when you hear somebody say slip, when referencing clay, not slip on the ice, but slip for clay, they are talking about this type of a substance that we use to adhere two pieces together. And you will be needing this anytime you're trying to join two pieces together. Very, very important that you use that score and slip process. So we've talked about the slip, let's talk about the score. Scoring is roughing up the surface. So you can use forks or toothpicks work really, really good also. Combs, anything that you can find, and you're going to just kind of rough up the surface. And what happens is when you do that, it creates all this rough surface, and when you join the two together, it has something to grab onto. All those little rough surfaces can kind of join together and interlocked a little bit, and then that helps those two pieces to join together. If you have two smooth things, it's a lot harder to join them together if they're super smooth. So you want to rough both surfaces. So you're going to score the cone, and you're going to score the sphere. All right, so we have scored both of the pieces, and I'm going to, my kids are always like, they can't wait to get their fingers in the slip, and then when they do, ew, it's so gross, and then they don't want to touch it anymore. But I like slip. I think it's pretty fun. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a big mud bath, I guess. And so you are going to need to put slip on both pieces that you are adhering together. And so then once you get that together, you can just kind of push everything together, like so. Now, if you can zoom in here and see kind of close where I've joined these two pieces together, I've got slip that's kind of oozing out of all those edges, and you're going to need to smooth the two surfaces to where they become one. So that's where it comes in handy to use some of your other tools. Like I said, you could use the spoon, which I've now got full of slip. All right, you could use the edge of your spoon and join these two pieces together. So I'm taking a little bit of the clay from the top of the sphere, and I'm kind of pulling it down in a downward kind of motion as I'm joining the two shapes together. All right, and you want to do that all the way around. And it looks a little messy now, but at least I've got my two pieces joined together. Now once I've done that, then I can go back with my finger and I can really start to smooth the surfaces together. All right? Now, next thing I'm going to do is I want to kind of hollow this out a little bit. So I'm actually going to take my thumb and I'm going to push my thumb up inside the clay. And I'm going to begin to do the pinch method. And if you've watched the show for very long, we've done a clay project before where we talked about the pinching. And what you're doing is as you are putting your finger inside the clay, you are pushing with your finger kind of around like this as you go around. So you'll see kind of as my hand goes around, my thumb is pushing up against the wall of the clay and my outer fingers are pushing up against the outer wall of the clay, and it is squeezing the clay. So we are using the pinch method to kind of hollow out this surface. So I'm going to kind of spin this so that you guys can kind of see what that's starting to look like. You can see the inside. All right, and also another good point, I'm starting to get some cracks in my clay right here, and what that means is that my clay is getting too dry. So that means I need to add a little bit of water. So I'm actually just going to put my fingers in my slip a little bit. If you add too much water to this, your clay will become very kind of like Jell-O. And so you want to avoid too much water. You want to have just enough, not too much, so that it still has a good shape, and when it stands, it can stand on its own. If you add too much water, your clay will just start all on its own. It will just kind of melt like a snowman. So we do not want that. All right, so make sure that you continue to add a little bit of water, but don't douse the whole thing with water. All right. Okay, so I've now got the inside kind of hollowed out. And the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that when I set this down that it is an even surface. So I'm going to kind of bang it on my table a little bit. And then we are ready to start adhering the arms. All right. Now you are also going to need 2 smaller cones to create your arm shapes. And really quick, I'm smoothing this surface out just a little bit. All right, so this is going to be the head. This is the body, and we're going to work on arms real quick. So I need 2 cones, and these are going to be obviously a lot smaller. I'm going to get a tad bit of water. All right, and I've got my first cone shape, and I'm actually going to kind of stick my finger inside there a little bit and hollow that out, kind of the same pinch method. And then I'm going to score both surfaces as I start to attach them. So I'm going to score here, and I'm going to score here. And I'm going to join them together with the slip. And you want, you know, more of the clay than you do the water. And then I'm going to attach this here. And remember that we are going for that movement. So remember, don't always make, you know, the arms perfectly down by the side. And then I'm going to do my other arm. And one thing about clay is that your hands are going to start looking like this. And this is one thing that my kids are like, that is so gross, I can't stand it, I need to go wash my hands. And you can go wash your hands, but they're going to just get that way again. But you're more than welcome to go wash your hands off. Speaking of washing your hands off, if you are working on this project and you need to take a break or you need to go do something, you can, especially if you're working with the self-hardening clay, you can leave and go work on something else and then come back. But you want to make sure that you cover your clay. So if you could get some cling wrap, like saran wrap or cling wrap, works good. You can just kind of wrap up your piece, and then if you need to go take a break, you can come back and everything will still be wet enough for you to work with. All right, so I have got my other surface here, and I think I'm going to put this one maybe going up like this. And the same way we attach the head, I want to join those two surfaces again. So I'm going to turn this a little bit so you can see it. And I'm going to use my spoon and I'm going to join those two pieces together. And I'm going to turn it, do my other side here, joining those two pieces as well. Next, I'm going to need two small spheres. And these are going to actually become hands. And it's probably going to be a little more of an oval than a perfect sphere. And I'm actually going to use my toothpick here to create those little hands. And if you get some little wads of clay in there, sometimes you have to kind of brush it off. All right, and I'm going to score, and I'm going to score these two, and I'm going to join it together. I'm going to shove a little bit down in there. And then I can kind of pinch this here. And same thing for the other one. And I'm going to go ahead and do those fingers as well, wiping off any of those little clogged up areas. And score and slip. The hardest thing, I think, is to remember. You get kind of so excited about getting everything together, sometimes you forget to score and slip everything. And my kids sometimes, I promise that I scored and slipped it. And then they come back and it's all falling apart. I was like, I don't think you did it. So you have to make sure, because as it starts to dry, if you haven't scored and slipped well, then it's going to fall apart when it starts to dry. All right, so now we have got our two arms. We're going to do a really quick nose, and then we need to do some feet. All right, your nose is going to be a small cone. And we're not going to hollow out the shape, even though you probably could if you wanted to. And remember that your mouse is going to need that little ball on the end of his nose, because we want him to have a cute little nose. And I keep making mine a little too long. I'm not quite happy with it. All right, that looks pretty good to me. All right, and remember that your mouse is looking up. And so I'm going to score up here on the top of the sphere, and I'm going to score the nose. And once again, we're going to join those two pieces together. And then I'm going to use a little bit of that slip that's left on my fingers to join those two pieces together. I think I'm going to use one of my other tools over here. I'm going to join these two. And remember, you have to do that all the way around. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the little ball up on top of the nose. And sometimes when you've got little bitty pieces, I know that it sounds kind of silly to attach those by scoring and slipping, even though they're that small, but it's very important, because those little pieces are really liable to fall off if you don't adhere them right. All right, so I'm going to attach that. This one, I'm not going to go around necessarily and attach it, because I want it to look very much like a little ball at the end. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to, let's do feet real quick. And your feet, I'm going to kind of do, I think a cone shape would probably be good for the feet. And remember, go ahead and draw those little toes on there, and think about what kind of a position your mouse is going to be standing in. And remember that we're looking for fluidity, movement, action, so kind of be thinking about that too. My arm is starting to fall because I got too much water, like I was telling you not to do. I'll tell you what to do in a minute about that. All right, so I am going to score and slip these two and attach it. Same thing underneath here. Now when you attach these two, you don't want it to sit too high up on these feet, so it's going to squish down quite a bit. So do you see how I'm kind of smoothing that? And from the side, it's going to be fairly flat. Okay, so there's one little foot. Move that so you can see a little bit better. And then my other foot, same shape. And go ahead and draw those little toes on there. We're going to score. I think I'm going to do this other little foot back over here. All right. Whoops, I forgot to do this one. All right. I'll join this together here. And I'm just flattening it down as much as possible. If you've got some extra clay, you can have it fold up and go inside that surface up there. That's okay. And if your cone that you've hollowed out starts to lose its shape as you're working on it, you can go back in there with your thumb and kind of reform that shape. All right. Now we need ears and we need eyes, but before we get into that, I was talking to you about if one of your pieces starts to fall. Once you know that you have your piece how you want it and you're not going to be changing it any, you can actually take, you know, something and prop it up on top of it, and as it starts to dry, can you guys see that? As it starts to dry, this toothpick will hold it in place, and then once it gets dry, it's going to be strong enough to hold itself. So you can always prop it up with something if it's too heavy and it's starting to fall. I think my arm it's starting to dry a little, so it's going to be okay, I think. All right. Let's talk about texture really quick. I talked to you about gathering some things up around the house that you could make a pattern with. So something that you might want to think about, and I'm going to turn my little mouse around here and show you kind of on the back here. You can lay this out and press this down into the clay, and it gives a really, really nice texture to press it in there pretty good. And my mouse is going to be wearing a little dress, so maybe this is the pattern that's on the dress. If you can see that, it looks a lot like the scales of a snake. So she's wearing a snakeskin dress. Ooh la la. All right. So think about those different patterns. You can also use some of your other tools that you gathered from around the house. If you want to make other little shapes, you could do little, you know, cutouts like that. You could either curl this down and create that pattern like that. You can also use your toothpick to draw on, you know, the clothes. You can also attach things like buttons and things like that. I think I'm going to attach some buttons really quick. That sounds like fun. All right, so I'm going to, trying to think where my buttons would be. I think I'm going to do my buttons up here. I'm going to do one over here. And so I'm going to, I've made a circle shape that I've kind of squished down. And I'm going to just squish that down on there. And then I'm going to need another one to match on the other side. And then once I get, that's not a very good circle, Miss Angie. All right, there we go. And I'm going to push that down there. And then I can come in and I can put the little dots that go inside here, so that it looks like some nice buttons. I might even want to draw on the rest of the clothes. I think I'll do that real quick. So she's going to be wearing a little dress. So there's that part, and it's going to come around here to the back. I'm going to turn this and kind of down here and over this side as well. And remember, at any time, if you make a mistake, go back with your finger. You can just kind of smooth it out. It's very forgiving. Let's see, this one over here. All right, now, let's talk about really quick about those eyes and ears really quick. You are going to need 2 spheres for the ears, and you're going to flatten these out a little bit. All right. Don't forget that you will kind of be attaching these up on the top of the head as well. And I'm going to actually use my thumb to just kind of press this down, and you can actually use one of your fingers and kind of curve it if you want to kind of give it a curved feeling. And then of course you're going to score and slip and attach. There's one ear. And eyes, you're going to, it's going to be kind of the same process. You're going to do 2 really small little spheres, and you're going to attach those, and they'll be up here really close to the nose. We're going to attach that there. I think I'm going to show you really, really quick. You know, for the mouth, you could do several different things for the mouth. I think that for my mouth, I'm going to actually do, my mouse is singing. I don't know what she's singing about, but she is singing like she has never sang before. All right, and then don't forget, you can also add the little whiskers. And if you didn't have time to do the individual little spheres for the eyes, you could also do the eyes that way. I think I'm going to try to do eyes super quick. All right. And then now, this is one thing that I want you to think about. As your clay is going to dry, it's going to be kind of a dark, kind of gray color like you see it now when it's all finished and dry. And it's going to take a good couple days for it to dry. And once it is dry, you can think about whether or not you would like to paint it. And if you're going to paint it, any kind of an acrylic paint works really, really good. And I'm going to come in here and put the pupil with my toothpick, with my little carving tool. All right. Now, some of the last things that you want to do before I let you go today is you're going to want to smooth your surface, add your textures, add all those details. And remember, if you have to come back and you want to add some other things, don't forget to wrap up your clay before you leave, because if you walk away for, you know, a couple hours, it's going to start to dry a lot. All right? So that is kind of what our mouse looks like today. I'm going to move our spheres and our cones and our cylinders today. Remember that we use that pinch method for down below. We use lots and lots of cones and spheres today to create our little miniature mice. Okay, so we are just about finished for today. Let's do today's art quote. Sculpture occupies real space like we do. You walk around it and relate to it almost as another person or another object. All right, boys and girls, one very important thing that I totally forgot, the most important thing in the whole wide world for a mouse, the tail. We forgot to do the tail. Don't forget to do your mouse's tail. To make your tail, you're going to do kind of a long, very skinny cone. It's actually more like a coil, like a snake. And then you can just attach that. Don't forget to slip and score, all right? And then we are just about finished. This is a mouse that I started a couple days ago. She is very dry, and I actually have started putting a couple coats of paint on her, and not quite finished with her yet, but I'm going to continue to work on her. Now, boys and girls, don't forget, if you would like to, you can go to AISD.net and you can view this show, and it's really nice because you can pause it and stop it as you need to, and then it's a little easier to pick up because, you know, I know that I go really, really fast, but it's a little easier if you'll watch it on the net. So you can always go there to see the show again or check out another show. Thank you so much for joining us today for another edition of The Amazing Art Show. Now go out there and make some amazing art.